Hi stamping friends, Melissa Kerman here with Melissa's Crafting Treehouse. Today I have some projects for you that were created for the August 2019 Color Challenge and Color Fusers blog hop. These projects feature the Daisy Lane bundle and a color scheme that I absolutely love. So the Daisy Lane bundle includes the Daisy Lane stamp set and a daisy punch. It's the smaller of the two punches you see there. And these also coordinate with the Daisy Delight stamp set and that larger daisy. Now I'm going to start with my Pretty Peacock ink, which is one of the new in colors. It's a 2019-2021 new in color. And I'm going to start with that first small flower image, and I'm going to stamp that 3 times. Now, I'm using a technique on this card called masking. You may be familiar with it. And so after I stamp these flowers, what I need to do is create some masks. Now, I've created 3 masks simply by stamping that image onto a post-it note, and then I'm actually going to fussy cut those flowers out. So I'm going to do this on high speed. I have done some of it ahead of time as well, and it is definitely laborious to cut these out because you want it to be cut really close to the edge. If anything, you're sort of cutting off a little bit of the edge. Um, and that's kind of important because when you stamp over a piece of paper, it actually sort of has a little gap where the stamp doesn't touch the paper that you're stamping on because of the small height of the post-it note paper. So that's why you have to cut just a little bit extra off of your image so that you don't get that edge and it looks like one image is right up close to the other. And I think you'll know what I mean. You'll see what I mean once I start the stamping. So I finished cutting my masks off camera, and you can see I'm just placing them over each of my flowers. And I actually left a little sort of handle, if you will, on the second 2 masks that I created. And I was sort of cutting corners time-wise. You can see I didn't cut off the top of that 3rd flower on the right. In the end, I ended up having to cut off more because it was creating a problem. Because I hadn't anticipated exactly where the foliage was going to be. So it's kind of best if you just cut the whole image out so you make sure that that doesn't happen for you. So now I'm starting with my foliage with the Bermuda Bay ink, and I'm just going to stamp some of those gorgeous fern-like images in between the flowers. I love this image. I think it's my favorite image in the entire set. And I'm just going to stamp all the way around. Now I'm realizing that I have a little bit of an edge on my stamp. I just rubbed off the excess ink there because I'm ending up getting a little bit of the edge of the stamp on the focal piece. And when I brought that paper up close, you may have seen it up there on the upper left. Now I usually trim down my stamps when I first get them if there's a lot of extra rubber on there so that I avoid the problem I just had. I didn't do that with this image, but after this video was made, I did actually trim down that stamp. If you decide to trim off your stamps the way that I do, just make sure you don't trim off the image on the front side as well. So now off camera, I'm going to go ahead and clean my foliage stamp, and I'm going to start stamping with the Coastal Cabana ink. Just get some kind of two-tone in my foliage. And I'm just stamping a little bit of that color in each spot to surround the flowers. Now I conveniently was able to cover up that little line that I had in the upper left-hand corner because I was stamping more of the foliage. Next I'm going to pull out my Blackberry Bliss ink and stamp 2 of my large daisies, one in first ink and the second one in second ink. And then I'm going to stamp the smaller daisy, 2 with full ink. Now it's important when you stamp these images that you stamp such that the petals are oriented like the middle one straight up and down, so that 2 pairs of petals that are opposite each other are parallel to one side of the paper, and that's because of how the punch is oriented. If you don't do it that way, it makes it harder to punch out those images. So you see how it's working perfectly here. So I'm stamping in the same orientation that the punch is oriented. So next I'm going to start assembling my daisy embellishment, and I'm going to use glue dots and also a dimensional in one spot to put this together. I also used my bone folder to curl up the edges of the flowers, and in some cases I sort of curled them all in one direction, as I am here, and then for some of the other ones I alternated one petal to the next, whereas now I'm alternating going backwards, and then once I layer them on top of one another, it makes it look a little bit more like a natural looking daisy. So now I attached the two larger ones with glue dots, obviously alternating the petals, and I did the fully inked large daisy on the bottom and the stamped off image on the top. And then again, I'm doing the same thing with my smaller daisies, curling up the edges and then attaching them. Now, as you can see for this one, I put a little mini dimensional on the back side of the bottom daisy, the bottom small daisy, and then I'm just going to layer that second small daisy on top using a glue dot. So now I'm removing my masks. That's sort of the fun of it all, is just kind of seeing the masks get removed, and you can see it looks, you know, not so good in the center, just because I had those sections of Post-it note that were still on the bottom of the flower, but that doesn't really matter so much because that middle section is going to be covered up with my daisy embellishment. So now I'm just attaching the whole embellishment to the center of my stamped area. And finally, I'm just adding that second small daisy to the center. I just put a glue dot on the back side and testing to see if I want to curl the edges, and decided I wanted to curl the edges. And then I'm going to go ahead and just place that in the center. So next I'm going to stamp my sentiment, and I'm using the Blackberry Bliss ink with an image from the Tasteful Textures stamp set. And I'm just going to stamp that in the lower right hand corner. Now I'm going to stamp a French script image from the Very Versailles stamp set using the gray granite ink, and I've used a variety of full ink and second ink for this one, and I'm just going to stamp it just here and abouts around the outside edges. Now I'm almost ready for the final assembly of my card, and I'm going to start with just attaching my focal piece to a piece of Blackberry Bliss cardstock. And then I kind of fiddled around with some different embellishments to put on this, and I happen to have a clear faceted gem that I'd already colored with Bermuda Bay Blends alcohol marker, and so I played around with putting that in the center, and I really liked that, so decided to stay with that. And then I'm attaching some Stampin' Dimensionals to the back side of the Blackberry Bliss, and I'm going to go ahead and attach that to my gray granite card base. So there's just one more step to finish off this card. I used my Bermuda Bay Blends alcohol marker, the dark one, to color a couple of rhinestones, and then I just added a medium size and a small size rhinestone to sort of surround the sentiment at the bottom. And here's my finished card. So for my second card, I changed up the colors a little bit in terms of their placement. So for this one, I used that small flower image with the Blackberry Bliss instead of with the Pretty Peacock. I also cut down my masks a bit to get sort of better quality stamping and coverage as far as the masking was concerned. Plus, I changed up the colors of the foliage. So the foliage was stamped in the Coastal Cabana, as you can see me doing some of that there, and then also in the Pretty Peacock. So as you can see, I'm just kind of zooming through this just to try to point out the highlights of what I did differently on this project. So now I'm removing my masks, and you'll be able to see that the foliage is tucked up a little bit closer to those flowers, and because I cut down the masks just a bit. And now I did the embellishment with the daisy a little bit differently for this one. I only used one of the large daisies that was stamped off, and then I still used two of the smaller ones in full ink. So the daisy is just a little bit more maybe delicate, less full. And of course I used glue dots to attach all these pieces together. On this version I did not use Stampin' Dimensionals. So for this version I used the Bermuda Bay ink to stamp the sentiment in the bottom right hand corner. The focal piece is attached to a piece of Bermuda Bay cardstock, and then that whole piece is attached to the Coastal Cabana card base with Stampin' Dimensionals. And then I also used a clear faceted gem and some rhinestones, but for this version I didn't color them. For the project dimensions and a complete supply list, make sure to go on over to my blog post. There's a link in the video description below, and make sure to check out the rest of the Color Fusers blog hop. These projects are really awesome. Can't go wrong with this beautiful color scheme. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and happy crafting!